The Buddha and his contemporaries. His contemporaries. 1.80 The time when Gautama took Parivraja there was a great intellectual ferment in the country. Besides the Brahmanic philosophy, there were as many as 62 different schools of philosophy, all opposed to the Brahmanic philosophy. Of them, at least 6 were worthy of attention. 2. Of these schools of philosophy, there was one headed by Purana Kassapa. His doctrine was known as a Kriyavada. He maintained that the soul was not affected in any way by karma. One may do, or one may get things done. One may do injury, or one may get someone to kill. One may commit theft or dacoity, or one may get theft or dacoity committed. One may commit adultery, or one may get adultery committed. One may tell a lie, or one may get a lie told. Nothing affects the soul. An act, however licentious, does not affect the soul with sin. An act, however good, does not bring merit to the soul. Nothing has any kriya, result, on the soul. When a person dies, all the elements of which he is made join in their originals. Nothing survives after death, neither body nor soul. 3. Another school of thought was known as Nitivada. Its chief propounder was Makhli Ghosal. His doctrine was a kind of fatalism or determinism. He taught that no one can do anything or undo anything. Things happen. No one can make them happen. No one can remove unhappiness, increase it or diminish it. One must undergo one's share of the experiences of the world. 4. The third school was known as Uchchedvada. Its chief propounder was Ajit Keskambal. His doctrine was a kind of annihilism. He taught that there was nothing in yajna, harm, there is no such thing as the fruits or effects of deeds to be enjoyed or suffered by the soul. There is neither heaven nor hell. Man is made up of certain elements of unhappiness in the world. The soul cannot escape it. Whatever sorrow or unhappiness there was in the world, the soul cannot escape. This sorrow or unhappiness will come to an end automatically. The soul must undergo rebirth during 84 lakhs of cycles of Mahakalpas. Then only the sorrow and unhappiness of the soul will end, not before nor by any other means. 5. The fourth school was known as Anyonyavad. The head of this school was Pakudha Kachyana. He preached that there are 7 elements which go to make up a being, namely Prithvi, Apa, Tej, Vayu, Sukha, Dukha and the soul. Each is independent of the other, one does not affect the other. They are self-existent and they are eternal. Nothing can destroy them. If anyone chops off the head of man, he does not kill him. All that happens is that the weapon has entered the 7 elements. 6. Sanjay Belputta had his own school of philosophy. It was known as Vikshepvada, a kind of skepticism. He argued, if anyone asked me, is there heaven? If I feel there was, I would say yes. But if I feel there was no heaven, I would say no. If I am asked whether human beings are created, whether man has to suffer the fruits of his action, whether good or bad, and whether the soul lives after death, I say nay to all these because I don't think they exist. This is how Sanjay Belputta summed up his doctrine. 7. The sixth school of philosophy was known as Chaturyan Samvarvad. The head of this school, who was alive at the time when Gautama was searching for light, was Mahavir, who was also called Niganta Nathputta. Mahavir taught that the soul had to undergo rebirth because of the bad karmas done in the past life and in the present life. One must therefore get over the bad, he suggested, by tapascharya. For preventing the doing of bad karmas in this life, Mahavira prescribed the observance of Chaturyama Dharma, i.e. observance of 4 rules: 1. Not to kill, 2. Not to steal, 3. Not to tell a lie, and 4. Not to have property and to observe celibacy. His attitude to his contemporaries. 1. The Buddha did not accept the teachings of the new philosophers. 2. His rejection of their teaching was not without reasons. He said that 3. If the doctrines of Purana Kasyapa or Pakudha Kachana were true, then one can do any evil or any harm. One may even go to the length of killing another without involving any social responsibility or social consequences. 4. If the doctrine of Makhli Ghosal is true, then man becomes the slave of destiny. He cannot liberate himself. 5. If the doctrine of Ajit Keskambal is true, then all that man has to do is to eat, drink and make merry. 6. If the doctrine of Sanjay Belputta was true, then man must float about and live without a positive philosophy of life. 7. If the doctrine of Niganta Nathputta was true, then man's life must be subjected to asceticism and tapashcharya, a complete subjugation and uprooting of man's instincts and desires. 8. Thus, none of the paths of life suggested by the philosophers appealed to the Buddha. He thought they were the thoughts of men who had become hopeless, helpless and reckless. He therefore decided to seek light elsewhere. Comparison and contrast. What he rejected. 1. This survey of the philosophical and religious thought shows that at the time when the Buddha formulated his sasana, certain ideas had a firm grip on the mind of the people. They were: I. Belief in the infallibility of the Vedas. 2. Belief in moksha or salvation of the soul, i.e., its ceasing to be born again. 3. Belief in the efficacy of rites, ceremonies, and sacrifices as means of obtaining moksha. 4. Belief in Chaturvarna as the ideal for social organization. We. Belief in Isvara as the creator of and in Brahmana as the principle underlying the universe. 6. Belief in Atmana or the soul. 7. Belief in Sansara, wandering together, i.e., transmigration of the soul. 8. Belief in Karma, i.e., the determination of man's position in present life by deeds done by him in his past life. 2. In formulating the principles of his Sasnathe, Buddha dealt with this old stock of ideas in his own way. 3. The following are the ideas which he rejected. I. He condemned indulging in speculation as to the whence, whither and what am I. 2. He discarded heresies about the soul and refrained from identifying it with either the body, sensations, volitions and consciousness. 3. He discarded all the nihilistic views which were promulgated by certain religious teachers. 4. He condemned such views as were held by heretics. He discarded the theory that the cosmic progress had a known beginning. 6. He repudiated the theory that a god created man or that he came out of the body of some Brahma. 7. The existence of the soul he either ignored or denied. What he modified. He accepted the great grand law of cause and effect with its corollaries. 2. He repudiated the fatalistic view of life and other equally foolish view that a god predestined as to what should happen for man and the world. 3. He discarded the theory that all deeds committed in some former birth have the potency to produce suffering, making present activity impotent. He denied the fatalistic view of karma. He replaced the view of karma by a much more scientific view of karma. He put new wine in old bottle. 4. Transmigration, sansara, was replaced by the doctrine of rebirth. He replaced the doctrine of moksha or salvation of the soul by the doctrine of nibbana. 5. The Buddha Sasana is thus an original piece. The little in it which is old is either modified or restated. What he accepted. 1. The first distinguishing feature of his teachings lay in the recognition of the mind as the center of everything. 2. Mind precedes things, dominates them, creates them. If mind is comprehended, all things are comprehended. 3. Mind is the leader of all its faculties. Mind is the chief of all its faculties. The very mind is made up of those faculties. 4. The first thing to attend to is the culture of the mind. 5. The second distinguishing feature of his teachings is that mind is the fount of all the good and evil that arises within and befalls us from without. 6. Whatsoever there is of evil, connected with evil, belonging to evil that issues from the mind. Whatsoever there is of good, connected with good, belonging to good, all issues from mind. 7. If one speaks or acts with a pounded mind, then affliction follows him as the wheels of the cart follow the feet of the bullocks who pull the cart. The cleaning of the mind is, therefore, the essence of religion. 1. 8. The third distinguishing feature of his teachings is the avoidance of all sinful acts. 9. The fourth distinguishing feature of his teaching is that real religion lies not in the books of religion but in the observance of the tenets of the religion. 10. Can anyone say that the Buddha's religion was not his own creation? Campaign of conversion. Buddha and his Vishad Yoga. To preach or not to preach. 1. After having attained enlightenment, and after having formulated his way, doubt arose in the mind of the Buddha. Should he go forth and preach his doctrine, or should he continue to devote himself to his own personal perfection? 2. He said to himself, "True, I have gained a new doctrine. But it is too difficult for the common man to accept it and follow it. It is too subtle even for the wise." 3. It is hard for mankind to liberate itself from the entanglement of God and soul. It is hard for mankind to give up its belief in rites and ceremonies. It is hard for mankind to give up its belief in karma. 4. It is hard for mankind to give up its belief in the immortality of the soul and accept my doctrine that the soul as an independent entity does not exist and does not survive after death. 5. Mankind is intent on its selfishness and takes delight and pleasure in it. It is hard for mankind to accept my doctrine of righteousness overriding selfishness. 6. If I were to teach my doctrine, and others did not understand it, or understanding it did not accept, or accepting it did not follow it, it would be weariness to others and a vexation to me. 7. Why not remain a sannyasi away from the world and use my gospel to perfect my own self? He asked himself. At least I can do good to myself. 8. Thus as he reflected, his mind turned to inaction, not to teaching of the gospel. 9. Then Brahma Sahmapti, knowing what was passing in the mind of the Buddha, thought, "Verily the world is being destroyed, verily the world is going to destruction, if the Tathagat, the fully enlightened, turns to inaction and not to teaching his doctrine." 10. Filled with anxiety, Brahma Sahmapti left the Brahma world and appeared before the Buddha. And arranging his upper robe on one shoulder, he bent down and with clasped hands said, "Thou art no longer Siddharth Gautama. Thou art Buddha. Thou art the blessed one who is blessed with the fullest enlightenment. Thou art the Tathagatha. How canst thou refuse to enlighten the world? How canst thou refuse to save erring humanity?" 11. There are beings full of impurity that are falling away through not hearing the doctrine. 12. As the Lord knows, proceeded Brahma Sahmapti, among the Magads arose in ancient times doctrine impure, with many blemishes devised. 13. Will not the Lord open for them the door of his immortal doctrine? 14. As one upon a rocky mountain standing, beholdeth all the people round about him, even thus, O thou, with wisdom distilled, ascending all, behold, look down, thou griefless one, upon those plunged in their griefs. 15. Rise up, O hero, victor in battle, O caravan leader, free from the debt of birth, go to the world and not turn away from it. 16. May the Lord in his compassion design to teach his gospel to men and to gods. 17. O Brahma, eminent and excellent among men, if I did not give public utterance to my gospel, it is because I perceived vexation, was the reply of the Buddha. 18. Knowing that there was so much unhappiness in the world, the Buddha realized that it was wrong for him to sit as a sannyasi with folded arms and allow things to remain as they were. 19. Asceticism he found to be useless. It was vain to attempt to escape from the world. There is no escape from the world even for an ascetic. He realized that what is necessary is not escape from the world. What is necessary is to change the world and to make it better. 20. He realized that he left the world because there was so much conflict resulting in misery and unhappiness and for which he knew no remedy. If he can banish misery and unhappiness from the world by the propagation of his doctrine, it was his duty to return to the world and serve it and not sit silent as the personification of inactive impassivity. 21. The Buddha therefore agreed to the request of Brahma Sahmapti and decided to preach his doctrine to the world. Proclamation of Good News by Brahma Sahmapti. 1. Then, Brahma Sahmapti, thinking, I have been instrumental in persuading the Buddha to agree to preach his doctrine to the masses, felt extremely happy. He saluted the Buddha, went round him passing to the right, took a look and departed. 2. On his way back he kept on proclaiming to the world, rejoice at the glad tidings. The Buddha, our Lord, has found the root of all evil and unhappiness in the world. He knows the way out. 3. The Buddha will bring comfort to the weary and sorrow-laden. He will give peace to those stricken by war. He will give courage to those who are broken in heart. He will give to those who are suppressed and oppressed faith and hope. 4. Ye that suffer from the tribulations of life, ye that have to struggle and endure, ye that yearn for justice, rejoice at the glad tidings. 5. Heal your wounds, ye that are wounded. Eat your fill, ye that are hungry. Rest, ye that are weary, and quench your thirst, ye that are thirsty. Seek the light, ye that are in darkness. Be of good cheer, ye that are forlorn. 6. In his doctrine there is love to create a longing to own those who are disowned or annoyed, to the degraded there is the ennoblement ever present to raise them, to the disinherited and the downtrodden there is equality blazing forth their path to advancement. 7. His doctrine is the doctrine of righteousness, and his aim is to establish the kingdom of righteousness on earth. 8. His doctrine is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. 9. Blessed is the Buddha, for his is the path of reason, and his is the way of emancipation from superstition. Blessed is the Buddha who teaches the middle way. Blessed is the Buddha who teaches the law of righteousness. Blessed is the Buddha who teaches the peace of Nibbana. Blessed is the Buddha who preaches love, kindness, and fellowship to help fellow beings to obtain salvation. 2 types of conversion. 1. In the Buddha's scheme of things, conversion has 2 meanings. 2. Conversion to the order of bhikkhus called Sangh. 3. Secondly, it means conversion of a householder as an upasaka or lay follower of the Buddha's Dhamma. 4. Except on 4 points there is no difference in the way of life of the bhikkhu and the upasaka. 5. An upasaka remains a householder. A bhikkhu becomes a homeless wanderer. 6. Both the upasakas and the bhikkhus must observe in their life certain rules. 7. Here again to the bhikkhu they are vows, the breach of which ends in punishment. To the upasaka they are precepts. They must be observed to the best of his ability. 8. An upasaka can have property. A bhikkhu cannot have. 9. To become an upasaka there is no ceremony. 10. To become a bhikkhu he must undergo a ceremony called upsampada. 11. The Buddha converted those who came to him according to their wish, either as bhikkhu or as upasaka. 12. An upasaka could become a bhikkhu whenever he felt like it. 13. And a bhikkhu had to cease to be a bhikkhu when he committed a breach of the major vows or whenever he wished to give up his membership of the order. 14. It must not be understood that the Buddha converted only those whose names occur in the following pages. 15. The instances are chosen only to show that he did not observe any distinction as to caste or sex in admitting persons to his Sangh or preaching his Dhamma. The conversion of the Parivrajkas. Arrival at Sarnath. 1. Having decided to preach his doctrine, the Buddha asked himself, to whom shall I first teach the doctrine? The thought of Kalam, whom the Buddha adored as the learned, wise, intelligent and of little impurity, what if I first teach him the doctrine? But he was told that Kalam was dead. 2. Then thought he of preaching it to Uddaka, but he too was dead. 3. Then he thought of the 5 old companions of his who were with him at Niranjana when he was practicing austerities and who had left him in anger on his abandonment of austerities. 4. They did much for me, attended me and looked after me. What if I first teach the doctrine to them? Said he to himself. 5. He asked for their whereabouts. Having learnt that they were dwelling at Sarnath in the deer park of Isiptana, he left in search of them. 6. The 5, seeing him coming, decided among themselves not to welcome him. Said one of them, "This, friends, is the ascetic Gautama coming, who has abandoned austerities and has turned to life of abundance and luxury. He has committed a sin. We must not therefore greet him, nor rise in respect, nor take his ball and robe. We will only set apart a seat for him. If he wishes, he may sit down." And they all agreed. 7. But when the Buddha approached, the 5 Parivrajkas were not able to abide by their decision, so greatly impressed were they by his personality that they all rose in their seats. One took his ball, one took his robe, and one prepared a seat, and one brought water to wash his feet. 8. It was really a great welcome to an unwelcome guest. 9. Thus those who intended to scoff remained to pray. The Buddha's first sermon. 1. After exchange of greetings, the 5 Parivrajkas asked the Buddha whether he still believed in asceticism. The Buddha replied in the negative. 2. He said there were 2 extremes, a life of pleasure and a life of self-mortification. 3. One says, "Let us eat and drink, for tomorrow we die." The other says, "Kill all vasanas, desires, because they bring rebirth." He rejected both as unbecoming to man. 4. He was a believer in the Madhyama Marga, Majjhima Patipda, the middle path, which is neither the path of pleasure nor the path of self-mortification. 5. Answer me this, he said to the Parivrajkas, so long as your self remains active and continues to lust after either worldly or heavenly pleasures, is not all mortification vain? And they answered, "It is as thou sayest." 6. How can ye be free from self by leading a wretched life of self-mortification if ye do not thereby succeed in quenching the fires of lust? And they replied, "It is as thou sayest." 7. Only when the self in ye has been conquered that ye are free from lust, ye will then not desire worldly pleasures, and the satisfaction of your natural wants will not defile ye. Let ye eat and drink according to the needs of your body. 8. Sensuality of all kinds is enervating. The sensual man is a slave of his passion. All pleasure-seeking is degrading and vulgar. But I say unto you that to satisfy the needs of life is not an evil, to keep the body in good health is a duty, or otherwise you shall not be able to keep your mind strong and clear and have the lamp of wisdom burning. 9. Know ye, O Parivrajkas, that there are these 2 extremes which man ought not to follow: the habitual indulgence on the one hand of those things whose attraction depends upon the passions, and especially of sensuality, a low and pagan way of seeking satisfaction, unworthy, unprofitable, and the habitual practice thereof, and on the other hand, of asceticism or self-mortification, which is painful, unworthy, and unprofitable. 10. There is a middle path which avoids both these extremes. Know ye that this is the path which I preach. 11. The 5 Parivrajkas listened to him with attention. Not knowing what to say in reply to the Buddha's middle path, they asked him what he was doing after they had left him. Then the Buddha told them how he left for Gaya, how he sat in contemplation under the banyan tree, and how after 4 weeks of contemplation he obtained enlightenment, as a result of which he was able to discover a new path of life. 12. On hearing this, The Parivrajkas became extremely impatient to know what the path was and requested the Buddha to expound it to them. 13. The Buddha agreed. 14. He began by saying that his path, which is his Dhamma, religion, had nothing to do with God and soul. His Dhamma had nothing to do with life after death. Nor has his Dhamma any concern with rituals and ceremonies. 15. The center of his Dhamma is man and the relation of man to man in his life on earth. 16. This, he said, was his first postulate. 17. His second postulate was that men are living in sorrow, in misery and poverty. The world is full of suffering, and that how to remove this suffering from the world is the only purpose of Dhamma. Nothing else is Dhamma. 18. The recognition of the existence of suffering and to show the way to remove suffering is the foundation and basis of his Dhamma. 19. This can be the only foundation and justification for Dhamma. A religion which fails to recognize this is no religion at all. 20. Verily, Parivrajkas, whatsoever recluses or Brahmans, i.e., preachers of religion, understand not, as it really is, that the misery in the world and the escape therefrom is the main problem of Dhamma. Such recluses and Brahmans, in my opinion, are not to be regarded as recluses and Brahmans, nor have those worthies come to know fully of themselves what in this very life is the real meaning of Dhamma. 21. The Parivrajkas then asked him, if the foundation of your Dhamma is the recognition of the existence of suffering and the removal of suffering, tell us how does your Dhamma remove suffering? 22. The Buddha then told them that according to his Dhamma, if every person followed 1. The path of purity, 2. The path of righteousness, and 3. The path of virtue, it would bring about the end of all suffering. 23. And he added that he had discovered such a Dhamma. The Buddha's first sermon, called The Path of Purity. 1. The Parivrajkas then asked the Buddha to explain to them his Dhamma. 2. And the Buddha was pleased to do so. 3. He addressed them first on the path of purity. 4. The path of purity, he told the Parivrajkas, teaches that a person who wishes to be good must recognize some principles as principles of life. 5. According to my path of purity, the principles of life recognized by it are not to injure or kill, not to steal or appropriate to oneself anything which belongs to another, not to speak untruth, not to indulge in lust, not to indulge in intoxicating drinks. 6. The recognition of these principles, I say, is most essential for every man. For every man must have a standard by which to judge whatever he does. And these principles, according to my teachings, constitute the standard. 7. There are everywhere people who are patit, fallen. But there are two classes of the patit who has a standard and a patit who has no standard. 8. The patit who has no standard does not know that he has fallen. Consequently, he always remains fallen. On the other hand, a patit who has a standard tries to rise from his fallen state. Why? The answer is because he knows that he has fallen. 9. This is the difference between having a standard and having no standard for regulating a man's life. What matters is not so much the fall of the man, but the absence of any standard. 10. You may ask, Ye Parivrajkas, why are these principles worthy of recognition as a standard of life? 11. The answer to this question you will find for yourselves. If you ask, are these principles good for the individual? Also, if you ask, do they promote social good? 12. If your answers to these questions are in the affirmative, then it follows that the principles of my path of purity are worthy of recognition as forming a true standard of life. The Buddha's first sermon, called Ashtanga Marga, or the path of righteousness. 1. The Buddha next addressed the Parivrajkas on the Ashtanga Marga. He said that there are 8 constituents in the Ashtanga Marga. 2. He began his discourse with the exposition of Samadhi, right views, the first and foremost element in the Ashtangamarga. 3. To realize the importance of Samadhi, the Buddha said to the Parivrajkas. 4. O ye Parivrajkas, you must realize that the world is a dungeon and man is a prisoner in the dungeon. 5. This dungeon is full of darkness. So dark is it that scarce anything at all can rightly be seen by the prisoner. The prisoner cannot see that he is a prisoner. 6. Indeed, man has not only become blind by living too long in the darkness, but he very much doubts if any such strange thing as light is said to be, can ever exist at all. 7. Mind is the only instrument through which light can come to man. 8. But the mind of these dungeon dwellers is by no means a perfect instrument for the purpose. 9. It lets through only a little light, just enough to show to those with sight that there is such a thing as darkness. 10. Thus defective in its nature, such understanding as this is. 11. But know, ye Parivrajkas, the case of the prisoner is not as hopeless as it appears. 12. For there is in man a thing called will. When the appropriate motives arise, the will can be awakened and set in motion. 13. With the coming of just enough light to see in what directions to guide the motions of the will, man may so guide them that they shall lead to liberty. 14. Thus though man is bound, yet he may be free. He may at any moment begin to take the first steps that will ultimately bring him to freedom. 15. This is because it is possible to train the mind in whatever directions one chooses. It is mind that makes us to be prisoners in the house of life, and it is mind that keeps us so. 16. But what mind has done, that mind can undo. If it has brought man to thraldom, it can also, when rightly directed, bring him to liberty. 17. This is what Samadhi can do. 18. What is the end of Samadhi? Asked the Parivrajkas. The end of Samadhi, replied the Buddha, is the destruction of avidya, nescience. It is opposed to micchaditti. 19. And avidya means the failure to understand the noble truths of the existence of suffering and the removal of suffering. 20. Samadhi requires giving up of belief in the efficacy of rites and ceremonies to have disbelief in the sanctity of the Shastras. 21. Samadhi requires the abandonment of superstition and supernaturalism. 22. Samadhi requires the abandonment of all doctrines which are mere speculations without any basis in fact or experience. 23. Samadhi requires free mind and free thought. 24. Every man has aims, aspirations and ambitions. Sama Sankappo teaches that such aims, aspirations and ambitions shall be noble and praiseworthy and not ignoble and unworthy. 25. Sama Vakka, right speech, teaches 1. That one should speak only that which is true, 2. That one should not speak what is false, 3. That one should not speak evil of others, 4. That one should refrain from slander, 5. That one should not use angry and abusive language towards any fellow man, 6. That one should speak kindly and courteously to all, 7. That one should not indulge in pointless, foolish talk, but let his speech be sensible and to the purpose. 26. The observance of right speech, as I have explained, is not to be the result of fear or favor. It is not to have the slightest reference to what any superior being may think of his action or to any loss which right speech may involve. 27. The norm for right speech is not the order of the superior or the personal benefit to the individual. 28. Sama Kamanto teaches right behavior. It teaches that every action should be founded on respect for the feelings and rights of others. 29. What is the norm for Samakamantu? The norm is that course of conduct which is most in harmony with the fundamental laws of existence. 30. When his actions are in harmony with these laws, they may be taken to be in accord with Samakamantu. 31. Every individual has to earn his livelihood. But there are ways and ways of earning one's livelihood. Some are bad, some are good. Bad ways are those which cause injury or injustice to others. Good ways are those by which the individual earns his livelihood without causing injury or injustice to others. This is Sama Ajivo. 32. Sama Vyayamo, right endeavor, is primary endeavor to remove avidya, to reach the door that leads out of this painful prison house, to swing it open. 33. Right endeavor has four purposes. 34. One is to prevent states of mind which are in conflict with the Ashtangamarga. 35. Second is to suppress such states of mind which may already have arisen. 36. Third is to bring into existence states of mind which will help a man to fulfill the requirements of the Ashtangamarga. 37. Fourth is to promote the further growth and increase of such states of mind as already may have arisen. 38. Samasati calls for mindfulness and thoughtfulness. It means constant wakefulness of the mind. Watch and ward by the mind over the evil passions is another name for Samasati. 39. There are, ye parivrajkas, 5 fetters or hindrances which come in the way of a person trying to achieve samadhitti, samasankappo, samavakka, samakamanto, sama ajivo, sama vyayamo and samasakti. 40. These 5 hindrances are covetousness, ill will, sloth and torpor, doubt and indecision. It is, therefore, necessary to overcome these hindrances, which are really fetters, and the means to overcome them is through samadhi. But no, ye parivrajkas, sama samadhi is not the same as samadhi. It is quite different. 41. Samadhi is mere concentration. No doubt it leads to dhyanic states which are self-induced, holding the 5 hindrances in suspense. 42. But these dhyana states are temporary. Consequently, the suspension of the hindrances is also temporary. What is necessary is a permanent turn to the mind. Such a permanent turn can be achieved only by sama samadhi. 43. Mere samadhi is negative inasmuch as it leads to temporary suspension of the hindrances. In it there is no training to the mind. Sama samadhi is positive. It trains the mind to concentrate and to think of some kusala kamma, good deeds and thoughts during concentration, and thereby eliminate the tendency of the mind to be drawn towards akusala kamma, bad deeds and bad thoughts arising from the hindrances. 44. Sama samadhi gives a habit to the mind to think of good and always to think of good. Sama samadhi gives the mind the necessary motive power to do good. The Buddha's first sermon, Cont. The path of virtue. 1. The Buddha then explained to the Parivrajkas the path of virtue. 2. He told them that the path of virtue meant the observance of the virtues called 1. Sila, 2. Dana, 3. Upekha, 4. Nekkhamma, 5. Virya, 6. Khanti, 7. Sakka, 8. Adhitna, 9. Karuna and 10. Muthri. 3. The Parivrajkas asked the Buddha to tell them what these virtues meant. 4. The Buddha then proceeded to satisfy their desire. 5. Sila is moral temperament, the disposition not to do evil and the disposition to do good, to be ashamed of doing wrong. To avoid to do evil for fear of punishment is Sila. Sila means fear of doing wrong. 6. Nekkhamma is renunciation of the pleasures of the world. 7. Dana means the giving of one's possessions, blood and limbs, and even one's life, for the good of others without expecting anything in return. 8. Virya is right endeavor. It is doing with all your might whatever you have undertaken to do with never a thought of turning back, whatever you have undertaken to do. 9. Khanti is forbearance. Not to meet hatred by hatred is the essence of it. For hatred is not appeased by hatred. It is appeased only by forbearance. 10. Sakka is truth. A person must never tell a lie. His speech must be truth and nothing but truth. 11. Adhitna is resolute determination to reach the goal. 12. Karuna is loving kindness to human beings. 13. Mithri is extending fellow feeling to all beings, not only to one who is a friend but also to one who is a foe, not only to man but to all living beings. 14. Upekka is detachment as distinguished from indifference. It is a state of mind where there is neither like nor dislike, remaining unmoved by the result and yet engaged in the pursuit of it. 15. These virtues one must practice to his utmost capacity. That is why they are called paramithas, states of perfection. The Buddha's first sermon, Compet. 1. Having explained his Dhamma and what it involved, the Buddha then asked the Parivrajkas. 2. Is not personal purity the foundation of good in the world? And they answered, it is as thou sayest. 3. And he continued, is not personal purity undermined by covetousness, passion, ignorance, the destruction of life, theft, adultery and lying? Is it not necessary for personal purity to build up sufficient strength of character so that these evils should be kept under control? How can a man be the instrument of good if he has no personal purity in him? And they replied, it is as thou sayest. 4. Again, why do men not mind enslaving or dominating others? Why do men not mind making the lives of others unhappy? Is it not because men are? And they answered in the affirmative. 5. Will not the practice of the Ashtanga Marga, the path of right views, right aims, right speech, right livelihood, right means, right mindfulness, right perseverance, and right contemplation, in short, the path of righteousness, if followed by every one, remove all injustice and inhumanity that man does to man? And they said, yes. 6. Turning to the path of virtue, he asked, is not dana necessary to remove the suffering of the needy and the poor and to promote general good? Is not karuna necessary to be drawing to the relief of poverty and suffering wherever it exists? Is not nekkamma necessary to selfless work? Is not upekka necessary for sustained endeavor even though there is no personal gain? 7. Is not love for man necessary? And they said yes. 8. I go further and say, love is not enough. What is required is mithri. It is wider than love. It means fellowship not merely with human beings, but with all living beings. It is not confined to human beings. Is not such mithri necessary? What else can give to all living beings the same happiness which one seeks for one's own self, to keep the mind impartial, open to all, with affection for every one and hatred for none? 9. They all said yes. 10. The practice of these virtues must, however, be accompanied by prajna, i.e. intelligence. 11. Is not prajna necessary? The Parivrajkas gave no answer. To force them to answer his question, the Buddha went on to say that the qualities of a good man are, do no evil, think nothing that is evil, get his livelihood in no evil way, and say nothing that is evil or is likely to hurt anyone. And they said, yes, so it is. 12. But is doing good deeds blindly to be welcomed? Asked the Buddha. I say, no. This is not enough, said the Buddha to the Parivrajkas. If it was enough, said the Buddha to the Parivrajkas, then a tiny babe could be proclaimed to be always doing good. For as yet, the babe does not know what a body means, much less will it do evil with its body beyond kicking about. It does not know what speech is, much less will it say anything evil beyond crying. It does not know what thought is, beyond crying with delight. It does not know what livelihood is, much less will it get its living in an evil way, beyond sucking its mother. 13. The path of virtue must, therefore, be subject to test of prajna, which is another name for understanding and intelligence. 14. There is also another reason why prajna paramitha is so important and so necessary. There must be dana. But without prajna, dana may have a demoralizing effect. There must be karuna. But without prajna, Karuna may end in supporting evil. Every act of Paramitha must be tested by Prajna Paramitha, which is another name for wisdom. 15. I premise that there must be knowledge and consciousness of what wrong conduct is, how it arises. Similarly, there must also be knowledge and consciousness of what is right conduct and wrong conduct. Without such knowledge, there cannot be real goodness, though the act may be good. That is why I say prajna is a necessary virtue. 16. The Buddha then concluded his sermon by addressing the following admonition to the Parivrajkas. 17. You are likely to call my Dhamma pessimistic because it calls the attention of mankind to the existence of suffering. I tell you such a view of my Dhamma would be wrong. 18. No doubt my Dhamma recognizes the existence of suffering, but forget not that it also lays equal stress on the removal of suffering. 19. My Dhamma has in it both hope and purpose. 20. Its purpose is to remove avidya, by which I mean ignorance of the existence of suffering. 21. There is hope in it because it shows the way to put an end to human suffering. 22. Do you agree with this or not? And the Parivrajkas said, yes, we do. The response of the Parivrajkas. 1. The 5 Parivrajkas at once realized that this was really a new Dhamma. They were so struck by this new approach to the problems of life that they were unanimous in saying, never in the history of the world has any founder of religion taught that the recognition of human suffering was the real basis of religion. 2. Never in the history of the world has any founder of religion taught that the removal of this misery is the real purpose of it. 3. Never in the history of the world had a scheme of salvation been put forth, so simple in its nature, so free from supernatural and superhuman agency, so independent of, even so antagonistic to, the belief in a soul, to the belief in God and to the belief in life after death. 4. Never in the history of the world had a scheme of religion been put forth which had nothing to do with revelation and whose commands are born of the examination of the social needs of man and which are not the orders of a God. 5. Never in the history of the world has salvation been conceived as the blessing of happiness to be attained by man in this life and on this earth by righteousness born out of his own efforts. 6. These were the sentiments which the Parivrajkas uttered after they had heard the Buddha's sermon on his new Dhamma. 7. They felt that in him they had found a reformer, full of the most earnest moral purpose and trained in all the intellectual culture of his time, who had the originality and the courage to put forth deliberately and with a knowledge of opposing views, the doctrine of a salvation to be found here, in this life, in inward change of heart to be brought about by the practice of self-culture and self-control. 8. Their reverence for him became so unbounded that they at once surrendered to him and requested him to accept them as his disciples. 9. The Buddha admitted them into his order by uttering the formula Ehi Bhikkave, come in Bhikktus. They were known as the Panchavargya Bhikkhus.